I saw the prototype of this bequiet Dark Base 701 at Computex of this year, but the thing is, for that video I was behind the camera rather than in front of it. Had you been able to see my face, what you would have seen is something along the lines of this. Because bequiet has not only combined support for large radiators both in the front and the top, it's added a whole heap of mesh to the case. We've got the prospect of airflow and quiet operation. We also have Silent Wings 4 fans. And because this is a sponsored build rather than a review, I don't have to damp down my enthusiasm and give you the crotchety old geezer routine of I don't like this feature or that feature. I can just get on and enjoy the product. And the thing about that video from Computex is that it's had 50k views to date, which means that A, some of you haven't subscribed, and B, some of you subscribers haven't rung the bell. So would you mind fixing that immediately? Thank you very much. bequiet has three families of cases. We've got silent base, dark base and shadow base. So you cannot simply say the bigger the number, the bigger the case, the smaller the number, the smaller the case. This Dark Base 701 actually lies towards the upper end of the product range, both in terms of price and physical size. So let's take a look at some of the features. We have a hefty piece of glass on the main side panel, very chunky. Around the back, steel panel. Decent piece of noise deadening material. We have the mesh front panel, and on either side of it we have an RGB light strip. Here you will note we have a hub that controls both PWM and ARGB. So before I pull off the front panel, let's have a quick look at the light show. It's a fairly subtle light show, just these two strips down either side of the front panel. And we control the light show with this hardware button. Loads of choices, but of course if you prefer you can plug the case into the ARGB header on your motherboard and have the motherboard software do the job for you. That's that button. This button is for fan control. 3 presets. That's the mid position. And that's full noise. And back to silent mode. As for front I/O, we have 2 USB-A, headset jack and a USB-C. So that's all absolutely fine. To remove the top panel, 2 thumb screws. And away it comes. Loads of mesh. Front panel. Simply pulls away, and looking on the inside you can see it's actually quite a complicated structure, and there we have the gold finger contact for the 2 light strips at the sides. Dust filter, and bottom dust filter. And now we're inside the chassis. We can see there are 1, 2, 3 140mm Silent Wings 4 fans. They're rated up to 1900 RPM and are of course PWM controlled. bequiet supplies you with a number of drive positions, 1, 2, 3. However, if you want to add a maximum storage to this case, you need to buy an accessory drive bay that goes in the floor of the case. Realistically, once you allow for M.2 storage in your motherboard, probably this will be sufficient. But if you want a total of, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 drives, perhaps you'll need to invest in that accessory. The case is supplied with a number of twisty ties securing cables to the frame, and the Velcro straps are not installed as supplied. The accessories are all in the pack. I've done this so you get an initial first. That looks tidy. Look. However, I've got ahead of myself. To show you the fan racks, I actually need to snip some of these cable ties and release a few of the cables. You can install either 3 120s or 3 140mm fans in the front. If you want liquid cooling instead, maximum of a 280 or a 360. So that's nice and straightforward. If you want to increase airflow in the front of your case, pull out that panel and replace it with this alternate accessory. And with those panels switched over, you can install a 120 or 140mm fan in the floor of the case to further improve airflow. in the roof of the case. It's the same deal as the front, so you get one 140 installed. You can install 3 140s or 3 120s. If you want to install liquid cooling, maximum 280 or 360. But, as the saying goes, there's more. If we remove a few screws, slacken off a couple of other screws, detach the cables from the back panel, including the PWM hub, just to make life easy, pop out this panel, and now we can remove the entire motherboard assembly. Slide it back into place on the opposite side of the case. Snap that panel back in. Then we've got to tidy up the cables. However, the end result is an inverted PC. The idea being, of course, the hardware's on the other side of the case. The motherboard has the CPU down the bottom and the graphics card up the top. Personally, I feel no need to invert my PC inside my case. But if you fancy this, there you go. That's how it's done. In addition to the Dark-Base 701 case, bequiet sent us a handful of other bits and pieces for the build. Power supply is this Dark Power 13 1000 watt titanium rated ATX3 power supply. We have 5 of the Silent Wings 4's 140mm PWM fans, which means we could put 2 in the front, 2 in the roof, 1 in the floor to fully populate the case. But you might be thinking there'll be no space for an AIO cooler, and that is quite correct. They have sent us an air cooler. When did I last use an air cooler in a PC build? It's been quite a while. This is the Dark Rock Elite and it's rated at 280 watts TDP. I'm intending on using a Core i9 14900K, so I'm actually going to have to limit the power because that thing can zoom straight past 300 watts. And this is that cooler, which is a chunky beast, should certainly be up to the job. And finally we have a PCI Express riser cable, so if I fancy I can install the graphics card vertically rather than horizontally. Let's put all that hardware to one side and start with the power supply. And let's see what we've got. The power supply is fully modular, just as we'd expect. Conventional kettle plug rather than one of those great big chunky affairs, and a box of cables. There we have the 12 volt high power for the graphics card. We don't need the regular VGA cable. 8-pin EPS, 4+4 EPS. That's interesting. You actually get a European and a UK power cord. Nice one, be quiet. Accessories, that's pure SATA, and that's a combination of Molex and SATA. We don't need Molex, so let's park that. And there we have the 24-pin main power. And that hooks up to the overclocking connector, which is going to give all the juice to the main rail and allow you to go for it. But I'm going to be restricting my processor because of the air cooler, so I'm going to park that, don't need it. Installing it with the cooling fan facing downwards. And next we have the motherboard assembly. I recently did a roundup of a couple of Gigabyte Z790 refresh motherboards along with 14th gen processors, and I said I'll be using one of those two boards in this build. And I've decided it's the Z790 Aorus Master X, which is E80X, and it's not quite black, it's black and grey and blue, but I think aesthetically it's going to mix in very nicely with the Dark-Base 701. We have a Core i9 14900K, memory is this T-Force Vulcan Alpha, DDR5 6000. The reason I've gone for this particular memory is its low profile, and this hefty great big cooler needs all the clearance it can get. So let's get the motherboard assembly installed and see how things are looking. That's the motherboard assembly installed along with the base of the cooler, because I like to make life easy for myself. However, there is access to the back of the CPU socket through the motherboard tray cutout, so I could have installed the cooler hardware once the motherboard was in place. And now it's time to install the cooler. This is the first time I've actually got up close and personal to the Dark Rock Elite, and I like this. You have a magnetic top cover. The fan assembly just pulls out. Again, looks like more magnets. And you're left with a twin tower cooler and a single fan on this side. We have a tiny syringe thermal compound. Let's get carried away, why not? And despite the fact it's so tiny, I haven't actually used it all. Surprised about that. In with the cooler. The cooler is supplied with a screwdriver. It's been a considerable time since I last installed a bequiet air cooler, many years. And I have to say that process was a lot more straightforward than the nightmare I remember from way back when. So that's good news. Daisy chain the two fans together. Slide that home. And all I have to do is hook up the RGB and the PWM. I had intended to use this bequiet riser that was supplied by bequiet along with the other components, but that's not possible. Even though we have 3 output slots ready for the graphics card won't actually fit under that huge air cooler. So let's park that idea. Instead, let's move on and install these 5 Silent Wings 4 fans. That's going to be 2 in the front, 2 in the roof, 1 in the floor. We've obviously got space in the case for them. But the PWM hub can also support those extra fans. It can take up to 8 in total. We've got 3 installed at present. So 5 more, no problem at all. This is interesting. The securing mechanism supplied with these Silent Wings 4 fans is this pin that pushes into the rubber in the corner. But if you choose, you can release the corner fitting like that and snap on these alternates. Which means you can use a conventional screw. However, I'm going to try them with the stock mounting system and see how well that works. That's 4 fans installed, so the roof is populated, the floor is populated, and we need to do 1 more in the front. That installation system works really well. It begs the question why bequiet actually uses conventional screws on the 3 fans they actually supply in the case as stock. Most peculiar. Anyway, that's all the fans installed, and now it's time for the graphics card. I'm using my tried and true Gigabyte RTX 4080 gaming OC, which of course is absolutely enormous. All we need now are a few panels and filters, and we should be ready for startup. Not exactly colourful at the moment, but perhaps the RGB will help us ever so slightly. The PC's up and running, and with the fans in silent mode it is indeed truly quiet. Just for a laugh, let me hit the button and turn it up. Absolutely hysterical and entirely pointless. The finished result is very pleasing, and I am genuinely surprised that bequiet didn't want this case reviewed but instead went for a featured build. Still, it's their choice, and if I had reviewed this case, let me tell you, the result would have been